After a devastating loss in a huge game against the New York Rangers, we have a major trade update for the New York Islanders to discuss in this episode of Islanders Digest, as according to reports, Lou Lamoriello has finally accepted that it is time for the New York Islanders to sell. We're going to be talking about that on this episode of Islanders Digest, but before we get into it, be sure to subscribe, be one of our first 100 subscribers. If you're an Islander fan and you want more Islanders content, this is the channel for you. Now, on one hand, last night's game was absolutely devastating to watch. The Islanders got swept by the New York Rangers. The past two games, they really haven't even looked competitive against the Rangers, but if there is a bright side to all this, it's that these losses have finally seemed to convince Lou Lamoriello that this team does not have it in them, that the Islanders should sell, which in reality, I feel like a lot of fans have known for a while, but Lou Lamoriello has been reluctant to commit to selling. He still hasn't fully committed, but it's appearing now that Lou Lamoriello is going to do the right thing on the deadline and sell. According to this report, by the fourth period, the Islanders have started trade talks involving Nelson and Palmieri. These are two assets the Islanders 100% have to trade. Both Nelson and Palmieri are holding a lot of value, and this year on the trade deadline, there doesn't seem to be a lot of teams selling, and the teams that are selling do not seem to have players that have a lot of value. As a result, there are a lot of teams that are competitors who really need to add to their lineup, and Nelson and Palmieri are looking at like some of the best options to do so. And a little later on in this video, we're going to be talking about what the Islanders could be expecting in return for Nelson and Palmieri. In other reports, there is also some speculation from Stefan Rosner that the Islanders, especially having 8 defensemen, soon going to be having 9 defensemen, that they could be considering moving a defenseman. And one defenseman that Rosner brings up in his article is Scott Mayfield, who I definitely think the Islanders could consider moving. Now, trading Scott Mayfield definitely will not land the Islanders a major return, but especially considering that his contract has so much term left, if the Islanders could clear his $3 million plus per year for the next 5 years off the books, I definitely think that would be a win for the team to be able to spend that money doing something else. And I don't hate Scott Mayfield as a player. I actually think he does provide some value for the defense. Honestly, I think he provides a lot more value than fans give him credit for. However, with all the defensemen the Islanders have now, especially considering they already have tough, strong defensemen such as Ryan Pollock, Adam Pelech, and hopefully Romanov locked up long-term, they really don't seem to have as much of a need for Scott Mayfield. I know some fans want to see Noah Dobson get traded. Honestly, since we heard the initial reports that the Islanders were shopping Noah Dobson, we really haven't heard more after that. I'm beginning to get the feeling that the Islanders really are not high on pushing Dobson out, or at least not at the deadline. Dobson being a restricted free agent, you could always trade him later on at the draft. You really don't have to focus on this now, while a player like Scott Mayfield might be easier to trade now while a team is really trying to get some reinforcements for the playoffs. And like I said, it is definitely the right decision for the Islanders to sell at this point. If you look at the standings right now, the Islanders have a long way to climb, and they just don't seem to have it. I mean, look, the Rangers are a team on the outside looking in. They are tied now, but they're on the outside looking in. And for the Islanders to lose so embarrassingly to the Rangers twice, it really shows that they just don't have it. As much as I would love to see a playoff run, who knows what will happen? It just doesn't seem like they have it, and it does not make sense for them to retain Brock Nelson or retain Kyle Palmieri. Again, there really is no major loss if they retain a player like Scott Mayfield. A lot of fans want to go into that full rebuild mode where they just strip the team of all its assets, trade Pajot, any player who you can trade. I really don't think that's going to happen. Lou Lamoriello's plan is definitely not to strip this team down to the bones. I think the plan is definitely more rebuilds on the fly. So while you can definitely see players like Scott Mayfield moving, especially if the Islanders do want to go in a different direction with the defense, as we've seen, Adam Boqvist is getting more and more playing time, playing more time than Scott Mayfield. So that really shows you how the Islanders feel about Boqvist. Maybe they're moving more in a puck-moving direction. They have Scott Perunovich also waiting in the wings. Maybe that's the direction they're going. I definitely don't think the Islanders are going to fully tear the team apart. A lot of people are talking about Pajot again, and this was definitely mentioned on the 32 Thoughts podcast. If the Islanders trade Nelson, I think it's really unlikely they trade two centers. We'll see what happens. Maybe if a team gives Lou Lamoriello an offer he can't refuse, he will accept an offer to Pageau. But if he's trading Brock Nelson, I really cannot see the Islanders also going out and trading Pageau. But we'll see what happens. Now, one thing I'm really excited about, especially with the Islanders seeming to finally accept that they should be sellers on the deadline, is their assets hold a lot of value in a year where it seems like it is definitely a seller's market. We look at this trade today with the Boston Bruins. They basically got a second-round pick. I know it's a complicated three-way trade, but basically they got a second-round pick for Trent Frederick, who is a player who is, currently injured, probably almost definitely will be back for the playoffs, but a player who's injured, only has about 8 goals this season. He is a physical presence, but for a player like that to get a second-round pick, I mean, the other day we also saw Gustav Nyquist earn a second-round pick from the Minnesota Wild. It shows just how much of a seller's market this is. If players like Gustav Nyquist and Frederick could get second-round picks, what can players like Brock Nelson and Kyle Palmieri get in this trade deadline? And that is really what I want to go into right now. First, we're going to take a look at Brock Nelson. Definitely going to get the best return for the New York Islanders. There have been several teams rumored interested in him. Honestly, any team who is trying to make a push in the playoffs likely has some interest in Brock Nelson. However, there are a few teams who are willing to give up top assets for Brock Nelson. And those are the teams I really want to focus on. I mean, you look at his year this season, has 41 points in 60 games. Most of those points are even strength. He also plays well defensively. He's scoring shorthanded. This is a player that any team wanting to make a push in the playoffs is going to want to have. And you're definitely not going to want a team that you're going to be playing in the playoffs to acquire Brock Nelson. So that may even add even more incentive to make sure that you're the team that acquires him, because he is that good of a center. He's a great player. I love Brock Nelson. I wish he could stay on the Islanders long term, but at 33, with where the Islanders are at right now, it just does not make sense. We'll see. Lou Lamoriello might still end up re-signing Brock Nelson, and that'll be a discussion for another day. But for right now, I really want to talk about what we can be getting in return for a player like Brock Nelson. Now, one team that has been rumored to be interested in Brock Nelson is actually playing the Islanders tonight. Now, hopefully Brock Nelson has a good game against the Winnipeg Jets. I don't envision the Islanders sitting Brock Nelson out in their final game against the Jets before the trade deadline. It really doesn't seem like a Lou thing to do to keep a player out of the lineup. He definitely wants to try to get as many points as he can. Lou Lamoriello, even if he does sell on the deadline, he's not going to wave the white flag on the season. He's going to try his best to field a competitive roster, which is why I don't think Pageau will also be moved if Brock Nelson is moved. But we can look at the Winnipeg Jets. Right now, they still have their 2025 first-round pick, which is definitely what I think the Islanders will be looking for in a trade for Brock Nelson. Now, there are some teams that don't have 2025 picks, and I definitely think that would make a trade more difficult. I don't think the Islanders want future picks in 2026, 2027. They're not a team like the Blackhawks or the Sharks who's really looking at a longer-term rebuild. The Islanders are likely going to try to be competitive again next year, and as a result, picks in 2025 have more value to them. I can honestly see the Islanders picking up some picks for their free agent assets and then moving them in the draft for players who are closer to being ready. But the Winnipeg Jets definitely make a lot of sense. They could use Brock Nelson, and I think if a trade gets done, I can see the Islanders getting a first-round pick from the Jets in 2025 and maybe a 2026 second-round pick. I'm not going to get 2 first-round picks. That would be absolutely absurd, but definitely think the Islanders are going to get more for Brock Nelson. If not a second pick, definitely going to be looking for a prospect, and if the Winnipeg Jets are not looking to pay that, some other team will, because Brock Nelson provides that much value. Another team that has shown a lot of interest in Brock Nelson that I think is definitely really interesting is the Colorado Avalanche. Now, as you can see right here, the Colorado Avalanche do not have their first-round pick this year, but I definitely don't think that takes them out of Brock Nelson. They do still have their second-round pick this year. Again, I don't think the Islanders would be interested in future picks in future seasons, especially for future first-rounders. But the Colorado Avalanche do have some interesting prospects in their system. And with Lou likely not wanting this to be a long-term rebuild, I definitely think he's interested in prospects that are closer to being NHL ready. And one that really comes to mind from the Avalanche is Callum Ritchie. If you look at his stats, he is a really good prospect. He was picked 27 overall in 2023's draft by the Colorado Avalanche. And if you look, he actually already has some NHL experience. He struggled a bit with the Avalanche, got 1 goal, but that really shows this player is closer to being NHL ready. And I definitely think that's something that Lou Lamoriello is going to value in these trades, really trying to get assets that they can use in the near future. So maybe a player like him and a second round pick gets the job done for Brock Nelson. I would definitely be more excited with that return than just getting a draft pick that's going to take years before they come back to the Islanders. Now, the next player we need to discuss for the Islanders is Kyle Palmieri. And Kyle Palmieri, not as valuable. Kyle Palmieri, the big issue with Kyle Palmieri is not that his points are really close to Brock Nelson, but he's a winger, not a center. As a result, he's going to command less value. That being said, one team that is really interested in Kyle Palmieri is the Los Angeles Kings. And as you can see here, the Los Angeles Kings do have their first round pick this season. They don't have their second round pick, but I really wonder if Kyle Palmieri can end up commanding a first round pick. Now, in typical deadlines, a player like Kyle Palmieri wouldn't quite generate that much interest. He would get a lot of interest, but typically be looking for a second rounder, maybe 2 third rounders, depending on the year. However, this is such a seller's market. There are so few teams actually committing to selling, and if you look at the wingers, there really are no wingers better than Kyle Palmieri, especially if you're not considering Mikko Rantanen, who is almost definitely not going to be moved despite the rumors. Kyle Palmieri is really as good as it gets when it comes to wing. So can the Islanders get a first-round pick for what's really seeming like one of the best wings on the market? I mean, we've already seen players like Gustav Nyquist get a second. Kyle Palmieri is definitely having a better season than Gustav Nyquist, is going to provide more physicality. For that, I definitely think the Islanders could potentially get the Kings' first round pick. With that being said, let me know what you think. What do you want to see in return if the Islanders do trade Brock Nelson and Kyle Palmieri? Let me know in the comments below. As always, if you're not already, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and let's go Islanders.